This week on MS Refresh, it's the roadmap recap for March 2023. The Microsoft Loop app finally entering public preview by the end of this month. Microsoft CEO is hosting a special Future of Work with AI live event later this week. And first, Yammer loses its name. Is it now also losing its Twitter account? All that and more. Subscribe to stay in the know. This is the MS Refresh Show. Hi there, and welcome to the Matt and Sean 365 Refresh Show. This is episode 81 for the work week of March 13th, 2023, and this month's roadmap recap. Coming to you from the East Coast, my name is Matt Wade.
And as always from the West Coast, I'm Sean Bugler. Matt Wade.
What's going on, man?
How are you? Oh, you know, I am so excited for our upcoming get-together in May. The M365 conference. Are you excited?
I very much am, yes, actually.
Now, I noticed in my inbox a couple of weeks ago that they have empowered some of us. I don't know if you were on this list or not. They've empowered some of us to up the ante, to let people know that if they use the chosen one's name, they can save not 50 like we've been talking about in weeks past, but $100 on registration. If they use Bugler 100 when registering for the M365 conference, you can save $100 now, which is pretty cool.
They could save $101 if they use Wade 100 and then find me.
Well played.
Yeah, I mean...
It's not like we get kickbacks. I can understand if you're like, I'll cut you a deal, I'll give you half of whatever it is. I don't think we see any of that.
Yeah, I can't remember, actually. But yeah, it is a great conference. If you've never been to the Microsoft 365 conference, it is the largest and premier. I should probably flip that, reverse it. It is the premier community conference in the Microsoft world in North America. It is taking place in Vegas the first week of May. And I got a couple sessions that I'm covering, but you actually have a full day workshop. So if you
have a full day workshop, yeah.
If you don't hate Sean Bugler and you want to spend a little bit of time with him and potentially
a small list
back and forth with him, have your laptop out and totally geek out over the course of 7 or 8 hours. He is covering, I forget now actually. It is
the Collaboration 201. It's leveraging Power Automate and Power Apps in SharePoint and Teams. So some really interesting opportunities to apply a lot of the stuff that I talk about here on the show that I'm really excited about in cohesive and intentional ways within the workplace. So whether you're a seasoned expert and you know what you're doing and you just want to kind of look for the tips and tricks, or whether you're just getting started and you've got a couple of base implementations but you want to take it to the next level, this is the workshop for you.
Whenever the fiance and I are watching Shark Tank, take it to the next level is a trigger phrase. And she'll just turn to me and go, they're taking it to the next level, babe. And I am currently very skeptical of you based on the usage of that
You're
terminology.
immediately like, I'll be the one to judge if it's going to the next level or not.
Yep. And I'll be talking about some Microsoft Teams usage and sort of, I call it Teams etiquette, but basically it's the how do you make the most of Teams from the everyday user perspective. And then I have a full session on Microsoft Loop, what it is, what it's supposed to be, what we're expecting, what are the updates in the recent past. We actually have some news on that today. And the conference is a great time. If you've never been, please come. If you feel comfortable traveling, definitely do. Vegas is always fun too. Really cool experience if you've never been, or if you've only been once. If you've been there 15 times or 100 times like a lot of people in our industry, you maybe not love Vegas, but the hotel is great. The conference space is great. And just interacting with people has been so good to do again after kind of a reasonably long split on that. But the sessions, we got a good lineup this time, and I'm just looking forward to bumping into people and saying hi and learning that much more from all these crazy good qualified folks out there.
One last thing I'll say is, some people who have been in years past, it's one thing if you're going for the community aspect. I think that's obviously a really valuable part of it. But there's always been this other part to it, which, maybe this is the obvious part for some people, but there's also, like, Microsoft has a massive presence at these events, and at this one in particular, and they often use it as a platform to make big announcements. This event isn't live streamed typically, so you often are getting front row access to announcements weeks or months before they actually hit the broader news cycle in our world, which is interesting. And I would hazard to say that there is no year I would want to be at more than this one when we start to talk around like the AI advancements that Microsoft is starting to push forward, the move fast and break culture that they seem to be leaning into, which is, I mean, I'm all in. I'm really interested to see where they're headed with this. So if you're on the fence, like, am I going to get anything out of this? It's just the community. I would say no. I think this is a great opportunity. I think this is a good year to go, mostly because I'm going to be there. And also,
I totally agree with all of that, including the last part. And I think a lot of people probably, if you've never been to this conference before, you might think that it's just, the Microsoft 365 side of things. So it's just Teams and Exchange and SharePoint, and it's really not. A good portion of the sessions that are going to be out there also overlap with Power Platform. We kind of look at that Microsoft 365 as including Power Platform fully. Like, you can't get the most out of it until you actually use that. And yes, there is a separate Power Platform conference run by the same organization in conjunction with Microsoft itself. To Sean's point there, it is a better together experience, to use the marketing phrase that they love. And I am really looking forward to, over the next year or so, how do we then bring that AI stuff into it that much more? Because that is now just part of doing work, just like tossing in a quick Power Automate workflow to, send a notification when somebody creates a list form, like that same kind of stuff, right? These things are all going to be working together, and I can only see this conference getting that much better as more of these cool features start getting rolled in, and you're not going to really know about it, or at least see it in person.
And get to ask questions about it.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, Ignite and Build, they're too high level, I think. And like, this is, this conference is really 50-50 Microsoft people and community people, which I think is great, because you get the marketing stuff from the Microsoft folks, and like, this is the intended use, and we're really excited to bring this to you, that kind of thing. But then you have the community people who will come at it and start beating on it and like putting it to work and say, this is how you can best do this. This is what things you want to watch out for. And you get that great sort of two-sided, view on it of this is perfection, this is what it'll do for you, it's going to be amazing. And then it's really great, but here are a couple things you should watch out for, or here's a best practice you should probably put into to doing here. So if you got a little education money in your organization and you're looking to spend it, this is definitely a good investment for anybody who is an admin. But also, like, most of these sessions are appropriate for 100 and 200 level, like entry level users who just want to figure out, like, oh, okay, we have this stack that we have at work, I should learn how to use this to make my day-to-day work that much better. And it doesn't just have to be admins, it can be any day users out there, definitely.
So Bugler 100.
Wade 101. Well, don't type that in. Just type Wade 100.
No, do. And when it doesn't work, you've got
and then come to me for the one. All right, so we got another big week where we got a bunch of news. Are you ready to kick off and tell us about everything that's coming this week or this month?
Let's get into it.
This is the news.
Hello and welcome to another Roadmap Recap. Let's kick things off with Bookings. Bookings has a couple of new features coming out this month. You'll soon be able to both CC additional email addresses on confirmation and reminder emails, and send notifications via text message. Be good. Add to that, GCC Moderate G1 licenses are also getting access to Bookings this month too. Now that said, no new Bookings items have been added to the roadmap since last October, which, with most of them having been added over a year ago, is Bookings hitting a feature plateau, or is there something bigger on the horizon for Bookings later this year? Time will tell. Jumping over to Excel, Excel is finally getting the ability to record actions using Office scripts in the Excel desktop app, both for Windows and Mac OS. Finally, a little bit more feature parity between the VBA experience and Office scripts. And as a security measure, we'll see XLL add-ins coming in from the internet being blocked by default. Pretty good. Over to Edge. Microsoft Edge is getting a couple of updates that are useful for M365 users. Split screen tabs roll out in April. This will let you have two adjacent tabs open in the same window. The new Microsoft feed that you see in the Microsoft 365 Hub and mobile apps will show up on Edge's new tab page this month. Edge's test base will support testing of how your apps work with newer versions of Edge and the monthly update channel of the M365 client apps. Jumping into Project, Microsoft Project should be getting 2 updates this month. The Assignments view, which provides more precision in your resource work scheduling, and the Timeline view is getting 18-month, 2-year, 3-year, and 6-year views for long-term projects, all of which I am grateful not to be on. Microsoft Search should see an active month of rollouts this month, including Outlook attachments will start showing up in Search. This is in targeted release. Results from remote repositories indexed by the Microsoft Graph connectors will be displayed in Bing's All search vertical if you're signed in with your M365 work or school account. Results will be consistent in all native search verticals, including all files, sites, images, messages, and people, regardless of whether you search in Bing, SharePoint, or the M365 Hub. The new video search vertical will provide better search of video files in Bing, SharePoint, and M365 Hub. And for our GCC moderate and GCC high viewers, you'll be able to get people-centric search and the messages search vertical in SharePoint and the M365 Hub later this month. On to To-Do, with a single update in March, but kind of a big one. You can finally log into multiple accounts in the mobile app, or at least on iOS. Hopefully, Android is to follow. Leaping into SharePoint lists in OneDrive, coming this month to OneDrive, the ability to favorite and unfavorite files should be consistent across OneDrive, document libraries, and the Files app in Teams, as well as the Microsoft 365 Hub. Thankfully, this is supposed to build on top of the existing pinning and favoriting experiences in the Office apps. The shared menu item in OneDrive's left-hand menu will now show files and folders shared across various M365 apps, including email, chats, and meetings, steadily positioning OneDrive as the single source of truth for all of your individual file content. On the SharePoint side of things, the SharePoint site sharing experience will now use Azure B2B Invitation Manager instead of SharePoint Invitation Manager when sharing with external users, which for those of you who have experienced the joys of trying to get an external guest in using SharePoint Invitation Manager, this is a welcome change. 3 new site templates are coming to SharePoint. Keep them coming. The image web part is getting an overhaul that includes improvements to text overlay and overall web part navigation. The page authoring experience will get a simplified canvas for adding sections and managing layout options. And for admins, the SharePoint Admin Center will list the last 30 days of changes made to a site from the Admin Center. And for Microsoft Lists, list templates will integrate the Approvals app in Microsoft Teams. The ability to export as a dataset for Power BI Data Hub is on the way. And SharePoint Syntex customers will be able to combine multiple PDF files into one on both Android and iOS. That's coming in March and April, respectively. Not sure why Syntex is getting into the Acrobat Pro competition here, but sure. And automatic image tagging is rolling out in April. Not much happening in the world of Planner. Microsoft is getting plan templates in all clouds this month. End of list. And here's a niche feature coming to Word this month. The new Send to Kindle feature will let you export Word documents to your Amazon account to access on Kindle apps and in various Kindle devices. Over to Viva, the Stories experience is graduating, and we couldn't be happier for it. From public preview to general availability via Viva Engage. Through the Viva Engage app, you'll be able to watch TikTok and Instagram Reel-like videos right in Outlook, Teams, and the Engage app itself. Welcome to the future. And lastly, coming this month to Microsoft Stream. Favorite a video from the Stream web app just like any other file in an M365 online experience. And variable playback speed for video, hotly anticipated, from half speed to double speed, as well as video analytics, have rolled out to all clouds.
That was the news.
Alrighty, excellent work, Mr. Bugler, as usual. So there are a couple things I want to talk about today. I figured I'd jump into the one quick one, which is we have talked about how you called the death of the brand of Yammer, an acquisition of Microsoft's a number of years ago that did not just use, well, I guess it did use an English word, but not a very common one like group or team or I'm not spiteful, but I always thought that it was.
You're yammering. You're yammering.
I just thought it was a little bit of a, an actual, like, it was better than NewsGator at least. But I thought that brand was reasonable. But you had called that you thought that brand was going to die. It did. It is now going to be just Viva Engage, which we were always kind of scratching our heads a little bit. Like, Viva Engage is literally Yammer in Teams, so what's the difference? There isn't one any longer. And
Surprise.
Sort of on that note, I was on Twitter the other day, and I noticed that the official Yammer account tweeted, drumroll please, as part of Revolution, we're becoming at Microsoft Viva on Twitter. Get ready for our fresh new look. And now I'm curious because Microsoft Viva has been around on Twitter for a while, but it's a locked or private account. 0 following, 0 followers. And it's not Viva Engage, it's just Microsoft Viva. So is Yammer getting diluted from its social media presence here, where it's now just going to be sucked into the collection of, what is it, like 10 or 12 modules now? It'll probably be 30 modules in the next couple of years, whatever. And it just doesn't have its own individual voice anymore, which is a great irony, given it's Yammer, the place where you have a voice to send out to groups of any size within an organization. So I don't know. What do you think, Sean?
Yeah, I think that is what it sounds like. It sounds like the Yammer, now Viva Engage brand is getting folded into the Microsoft Viva Twitter account, and they're just going to kind of set that Yammer account by the wayside as a shrine to what was in the workplace collaboration community space. Yep. But yeah, I'm disappointed in some respects because I felt like the Yammer's public engagement was really good.
Yeah,
they did a great job. Yeah, like that. Yeah, I think obviously Microsoft has always been really good at the public engagement piece, and especially within Twitter. But I felt like the Yammer team especially was always a step above. They were always keeping an eye on things. They were always in the conversation, and they were always talking about interesting and clever use cases. And maybe that'll continue to be the case in, with the Microsoft Viva account, but it won't be just that. And, I don't know about you, but like, I don't follow Twitter accounts because 1 out of 20 tweets are a banger. I follow like high density, like they're always tweeting something that I care about. And I think somebody may not be doing the math correctly if they think that they can capitalize on like the Yammer audience, for example, and that's going to carry the rest of the Viva Twitter account, or
especially since they're not rebranding the Yammer account. They're just saying they're moving to a new account, so they have to regrow that follower base, which seems, I don't know, inefficient. But
if I think what will probably happen is they will probably rename it. It'll be like a
Oh, you do?
Within like a couple of seconds, they'll like rename the currently Microsoft Viva account, and then they'll rename the Yammer to that. Like they'll do a...
Okay. Yeah, maybe.
If I were a betting person, I would say that'll probably be the case. They'll probably hold on to that following.
Which means that their follower base, though, is going to be completely based on Yammer to start, which just seems like a weird place to start considering Viva...
This is my point. Like, this is a bait and switch here.
Yeah, kind of. But that, to me, that's like, from the brand levels, right? Viva Engage is a subset of Viva, right? That is like, if Yammer's experience or the Viva Engage experience is strictly going to be coming from the parent brand, that's like Outlook and SharePoint coming from the Microsoft 365 brand. I mean, that just doesn't make sense.
I mean, it does from a do more with less mindset.
Yeah,
but it doesn't make sense.
They are in a space of needing to do. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, but I mean, like for me as somebody who just wants information about, to use your example, like Outlook, I don't want to get buried with like SharePoint and OneDrive and Forms and Sway. Like I just want my Outlook stuff. So
yes, right.
It's a shame, and I'm hopeful that they'll continue to find their voice, but I'm not heartened by the change and where it looks like it's headed.
All right, so what's something you want to do chat about today?
So last week, Microsoft announced that they are going to be hosting a Future of Work with AI event. Now, The Verge, a really great publication if anybody doesn't keep up with the tech space, The Verge hinted last month that this was on the horizon shortly after Microsoft hosted their Bing event where they announced Bing AI, which we now have seen kind of dominate the conversation in the world of generative AI.
Yeah.
So Microsoft has talked about the consumer-facing side of what they're doing with AI. It stands to reason that they now want to do the same thing on the work side of things, where they make a ton of money.
Totally.
So this Future of Work event is on March 16th at 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, or is it Daylight Time?
Today, 8 a.m. Pacific.
Pacific
time.
Yeah.
It'll be daylight time because we just, daylight time.
Can't keep up. Pacific time.
PT. 8 a.m. PT. It doesn't matter.
PT. 11 a.m. Eastern time.
Real time. Center of the world time.
The actual time. Could have sworn that was Greenwich, but neither here nor there.
New York City and Washington, D.C. beg to differ, but go on.
This is not a lot of information has been put out there, but we alluded to it during our Power Platform showcase episode a couple of weeks ago, that Microsoft had very interestingly omitted a number of aspects of the future of the Power Platform from their wave release plan that they're currently in. My original presumption was that Microsoft was going to announce something around Power Virtual Agents at this event. However, Microsoft decided they couldn't wait for that. So 6 days ago, Microsoft put out a release that both AI Builder and Power Virtual Agents now have features and capabilities powered by OpenAI, ChatGPT, and GPT-3, which is really, really cool. But it really makes me interested about what this future of work with AI, the future of AI and work could be when you've cut those out. Because those are two really obvious areas for Microsoft to say, like, here's where we're using AI. The Power Platform, Power Virtual Agents, which is an obvious one. And then the model builders. Now, The Verge had some suggestions as to where they might apply OpenAI's technology, and The Information, another publication, has some alleged insider information about where Microsoft is headed. But before I read those out, Matt, where do you think Microsoft might be able to apply OpenAI's technology? ChatGPT, GPT-3, DALL-E. Where do you think that might have a role to play in M365?
Yeah, so I have not read the Verge article at this point, and I look forward to reading it afterwards. So I am coming at this with just my own mind and a very blinder view of M365, because it's Satya and Jared that are presenting. So
our two favorite
Jared
people.
Exactly, and Jared is what the president of, or CVP of it's M365 collaboration ultimately, right? Something like that.
Something like that.
So if we look at that as the all right, it's this organization or stack that would potentially be affected, I think that would mean M365.
I just looked it up. CVP of Modern Work and Business Applications.
Oh, so he has Power Platform then. That means
it's a pretty broad
got
mandate
it.
there.
Okay. All right, so he's got basically the modern workplace for Microsoft Enterprise and business subscribers ultimately. Okay, good. So putting it into that swim lane, I would love to see massive improvements to Microsoft Search pulling this stuff into it. I could definitely see integrations with summarize this page on SharePoint or this news article in this news post on SharePoint. They've already pulled in the summarize a meeting and identify action items and follow-up things and notes and whatnot for Teams meetings in the premium license. So clearly they're already ready to do that, which is why I could see the other places being touched. Search might take longer only because Bing is proving the concept first, and then you got to bring it into Microsoft Search. But I'm trying to think email, right? Write your own email, essentially. Prompts
that would be a compelling one.
Instead of just, guess what your next 5 words are going to be, actually respond to the email and then correct it with whatever, things may have to be there. That could be an ethical question, I guess, which, everything I hear on online or in podcasts, especially from the Bing AI team, they're big on the engineering team doesn't even touch the AI tools until the ethicists are done, so they say, which I guess is nice to hear. I don't know if I fully believe that, but yeah, I think email, and messaging in general, right? So Teams messages should be included in that concept too, is drafting that kind of stuff based on the conversation. And then I'm kind of curious, does syntax just get completely overwritten? Does like that concept was a huge deal, and it was all graph based. It was not OpenAI based, right? It was based on learning models that was built on Graph, I think, Microsoft Graph, and then pulled into SharePoint and then made into its own licensing model. And it was great at the time a few years ago, but I feel like the step between Zero and Syntax a few years ago and Syntax and what OpenAI can do now, I feel like that second step is a huge step compared to the first. So
Sure.
I could see that having a ton more value and more people subscribing to it. So yeah, I think those are some of the big ones I would think of.
Yeah, so it makes sense. I mean, obviously, Microsoft has proved out the search aspect of having AI supercharging search. That wasn't part of the initial reporting, although it's not a hard thing to leap to. The information reports that OpenAI has GPT models from OpenAI have tested in Outlook to improve search results, alongside features for suggesting replies to emails. Word document integration to improve users' writing. So we've seen that with Editor. We already see the summative feature in, I don't know if you've seen when you're in Microsoft Word, it'll give you the option to create a summary that it'll auto-inject to the top of the document.
I saw, yeah.
Yeah, it's not hard to imagine that that's being powered by something, GPT related.
Yeah.
They did also recently announce, Microsoft announced this Copilot AI for Microsoft Dynamics that will write emails for people using Dynamics. So again, not a hard leap to see them jump to Outlook in that respect. Now, something you said about syntax, I think that's a very optimistic view that they would introduce this as something that would stack up against syntax rather than be something that they would gate behind syntax.
No, sorry. I mean that the syntax would basically be rewritten from the back end.
Oh,
it would be the
completely
same,
like from
same
scratch.
brand, but it would be nothing like what it was before, right?
Sure. Yeah, or at a minimum, a supercharged version of what it was before. Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's a really compelling argument right there as well. OpenAI's Whisper, which is the voice-to-text industry leading almost from the gate. Voice-to-text could easily power subtitles for verticals like stream. So that's going to be really interesting to see.
Yeah, that's true. So the connection between OpenAI, because Microsoft doesn't own OpenAI. They invested billions of dollars into it and have some probably unique exclusivity contracts with them. But Azure Cognitive Services already does voice to text, text to voice. But if it doesn't come up to the level of what OpenAI does their self-created products that they can basically just probably keep running on whatever cost model that they already have on their own cloud computing platform, is it worth them paying OpenAI for services or whatnot to make something that might be 90% good?
Oh, but they're not paying OpenAI.
Good.
I mean, they are in terms of investment, but bear in mind that just last week, Microsoft announced that the Whisper API, the ChatGPT API are all available now through Azure Enterprise services. Yeah. So, I mean, this is all on Microsoft's
But I mean, when
compute.
they're using it for themselves, right? So,
sure.
If they want to include, if they want to change live captions in Teams to be a Whisper-based model and not an Azure Cognitive Service-based model, I assume they have to pay for that, right?
I mean, they have to use their compute.
Well, yeah, but that's why Bing gives you only so many. Bing AI only lets you use it so many times a day because that's not cheap, right? They got to pay OpenAI for that call, right?
Well, so no, I don't think so. Because I mean, if you're running it on your architecture, your computer, your compute, then I mean, you're paying yourself in a sense. I mean, does it cost money in terms of the compute? 100%.
Well, I guess this might be exposing my lack of technical expertise in this stuff, but I guess what I assumed is that they are paying OpenAI for the services which happen to run on Azure because that was the original agreement, is that Azure supports the OpenAI platform. But ultimately, why would OpenAI not charge Microsoft for every call, right? Or anybody else, right? If I try to use it in Azure, I'm gonna be paying consumption, I'm assuming, for a Whisper connection or a ChatGPT connection. But maybe I'm getting off into the weeds a little bit too much on that one.
No, it is an interesting question, and Microsoft notably has not been very forthcoming with respect to what this arrangement actually looks like. You were talking about, before we went online, this really great interview between Kara Swisher tech journalist, and Yusuf, who is, I believe, a CVP working with and around Bing. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think it's like consumer products or something. But yeah, you tipped me off to Kara Swisher on her On with Kara Swisher podcast. Really good.
Which is great. Everybody should check that out.
I am loving how much she just pokes at people. At this point, she is far along enough in her career and well known enough in the tech industry that you can't really not avoid her. So when you do get interviewed by her, she asks you those tough questions, and then like when you don't answer the question, she'll make the comment like, "All right, fine, you don't even want to talk about that. Moving on, let's go to the next one." And like I really have enjoyed that. But she pushed a lot in the last couple of weeks on an interview with Yusuf about what's your relationship with OpenAI? Are you going to purchase it? Did you try to purchase it in the past? What is your exclusivity expectation there? And all those kind of things, which generally he wasn't able to answer, and he kind of laughed off as oh, you're always pushing so hard, and it's like, yeah, that's my job. Got to hold you people accountable because we can't trust you. Remember Internet Explorer? Like a lot of Justice Department references in that in that interview, which was actually very it was heartwarming just to hear people being taken to task on stuff and learning lessons from the past. But anyway.
Now, one thing, I'll just a quick course correction. I mentioned the Whisper API being available through Azure. I just did a double check on that. It doesn't look like it's available through Azure just yet. The Whisper API is available through OpenAI directly, but not as a feature of the OpenAI or Azure OpenAI services. ChatGPT, which is based on the GPT 3.5 model, is available through Azure. But Whisper, it appears, is not just yet. So, coming back to your original question of do they use their own or do they pay OpenAI? It really depends on cost, probably.
Yeah. And that's sort of like the very practical end user experience one that I've kind of griped about this a bit in the last few weeks is that the caption availability in a video in the new stream experience isn't there until somebody who has edit access to that video generates the auto captions, unless you have a transcript that you can upload, which most people are not going to have. Right? They're going to rely on that generative model. But I just assume that the reason they don't do that automatically is because of the compute costs on their side to do that. And then, we'll give you the option to do it, but you just have to remember to do it. But you don't have to pay for it. You're welcome. And their messaging isn't that, right? I haven't seen anything referencing it, but I'm sure that's the reason why. And I'm kind of wondering also is if you have that much better of a service like Whisper, if it's going to be built into the back end of that kind of thing, like, do we get it for free for all videos and it's turned on automatically? Because from an accessibility perspective, it is a lot to expect. If there's an organization of 15,000 people and anybody can upload video, and an X% of them typically have issues with auditory response or being able to understand, maybe English isn't your first language, right? Captions are a very, very positive thing for a lot of people. But if you have to rely on everybody to do that the right way, all of whom every single person has skipped a stop sign, run a red light, or sped, in a car, we can't trust people to do the basics. So how can they do something technical, right? I would love to see that, be a benefit there. No,
it's a great call out.
Doubt it, but yeah.
So stay tuned. We'll obviously be reporting out on it once we are able to watch the event. We'll also link the Verge article, which incorporates a lot of the stuff that is reported out on by The Information, which is behind a paywall. So we'll share both of those links in the show notes. We'd love to hear in the comments what you think either is coming or what should be coming. Do you think, to Matt's point, scanning all of your sent emails so that we can get tone of voice so that Azure or OpenAI can send emails as you? Is that compelling enough? I think it is. I was trying to figure out how to do that myself like 2 days ago.
I would love for it to look at the context of somebody sends like maybe some very detailed emails because they're trying to like make sure everybody has the right context, and for the people who do thanks as their responses to emails, to potentially suggest to them to be a little bit more forthcoming with detail or appreciation for the effort that was placed into it. Not speaking from experience, definitely.
Certainly not. No, definitely not something that keeps me up at night. I worked hard on that email. The least you can do is say, okay, thank you for doing this.
when you just get the KTHX back, and it's just like, oh, that hurts my soul so much. I put effort into this, people.
At least they reply to you.
Yeah, I guess. Oh, you have something you want to get off your chest there? Is that what?
There's not enough time in the world. That's everything I want to talk about on that side of things. What about you? Anything else?
So the sort of big news that we saw this week, or I don't know if it was late last week, was the announcement that the Microsoft Loop app is finally coming out to public preview. This had been basically a secret. I've been talking about Loop a lot, especially at conferences, both online and in person, covering what is the expectation for Loop, where did it come from, why is it different, why do we need it? And I think there's a lot of real arguments to be made there. Wade 100, come to the conference in May, and you will get to hear all about it. But the public preview is going to be rolling out at the end of March for the web and mobile apps only. Kind of not surprising.
Wait, March 2024?
I guess we'll see. But so end of this month, public preview for the web and mobile apps for Microsoft Loop, which many of you probably know is like the competitor for Notion. I think that it's a terrible way to frame it, honestly. I really don't think that that's what this thing adds. But be aware that it's coming. It is in the admin message center. There's a link in the show notes to that message if you want to see it. And also the message center number in the show notes. You can look it up if you need to. So key things to know about it is going to be disabled by default, which makes sense. You can have it enabled by Microsoft Cloud Policy as long as you target an AD security group that you have for your audience. So that audience could be your entire organization, or it could be 25 people, whatever. But this will be where you're going to start seeing Loop components being able to be placed into pages and workspaces within this app. And I guess we'll finally start seeing what's going to happen to the, where do the Loop components get saved? Are they always going to be in OneDrive? Hopefully not. What other tools are you going to be able to interact with? What other content can the app itself host? So it's going to be kind of pages almost like a modern OneNote. So you can type text in there that are not Loop components, but they're still within Microsoft Loop, which is where I think a lot of the confusion about what is Loop and why is Loop just a Notion knockoff isn't super correct, because Loop is really about those components that can be brought up in multiple places. Just recently, Loop components are supported in Microsoft Whiteboard as a general availability measure. So excited and looking forward to seeing this thing in action, and how you can use it, not just from the Loop component perspective, but the content, adding files, things like that. Honestly, I think in especially small organizations or organizations that don't have a really strong governance model, Loop will soon become a bit of a competitor to SharePoint, almost from an intranet perspective, or getting around.
Yeah.
Yep, definitely. Because SharePoint is definitely easier to use.
Is it? Than Loop?
It's easy. No, I was going to say that SharePoint is definitely easier to use than it used to be. And the whole modern, rollout of SharePoint pages and lists and things was an effort to try to get more of the everyday users to use it from that perspective and not be stuck with those blank white pages with the little tiles at the top back in the SharePoint 2013 days.
Yeah.
But Loop is probably going to be easier than that, because it's kind of like OneNote, but if OneNote looked like Microsoft To Do, and if you can all do this, interlinking and things like that, it will definitely compete, I think, from the intranet side. And I think organizations need to be prepped for that, because if little mini intranets start building up and they're not using SharePoint, your search entry point is going to change, your content management structure is going to change, and that's going to have some serious impacts from that perspective.
Speaking of, I know you had mentioned it's going to be disabled by default. I guess just calling out why it's going to be disabled by default is Loop, just from the jump, will not be fully compliant with all of Microsoft's security policies and things like that, and discovery and all that. So for those of you who work in enterprises and secure industries where that's a core requirement, it is something that's really important to be aware of, that you can't just flip the switch and throw this out to everybody, because it's not going to be ready on day one for those scenarios.
Yeah, that's a great point. So they talked a lot about, I think it was at Ignite maybe, about the sensitivity label options for Loop. Those, as far as I'm aware, have not come out yet. And even so, they were for Loop components. And the Microsoft Loop app, like I said, is not just components. It is pages, workspaces, organizational structures, things like that. So that content, as far as I know, cannot be protected. No DLP, no rights management, anything like that.
Although they have been laying the
labels.
they've been laying the framework for that. I don't know if you saw it, but obviously you've always been able to apply a sensitivity label to a SharePoint site, but recently you've also been able to apply it to document libraries specifically as well. So I think that the work is being put in to attack sensitivity labels with that nesting scenario as well. So clearly they've got their eye towards that.
Yeah, that's an interesting point to make there, because these loop components are just files, right? They're files within a OneDrive right now experience, and while they don't support the labeling right now, they're going to, and we've seen even previews that I don't even think they were just Figma previews. I think they were live, internal testing preview recordings of it. But yeah, where is that stuff going to live, right? So when you create a loop workspace, I think it's going to be called. Does that get it? Is that part of a Microsoft 365 group? Is there going to be a SharePoint workload that comes with it? If it is a group, it's going to have to, by precedent, I guess. And then do those files get saved in a specific document library? Do they get saved in the documents library? And to your point, do you apply separate labels within the libraries compared to the site? Because the site library or the site label is literally just visual. It has no control over the rest of the content in the site, but the document library ones do.
My theory, I'm just gonna throw this one out there, is a OneNote-esque folder structure. Like how the OneNote file format is actually just a folder that's been obscured by the web and the OS. The workspace, a loop workspace would be, this like file type that you could be stored in SharePoint or OneDrive, and then there's like that folder structure, which comprises of all the individual loop components that can be shared elsewhere. That's my
it could be
my guess.
I really hope that they learn from the mistakes of OneNote in the ever since the cloud came out. Essentially, like I'm not a fan of OneNote any longer. Because
breaking news.
Because they tried to make OneNote. They tried to do basically OneDrive syncing with OneNote before OneDrive syncing was a thing, which is great. It's a shared thing. It's a collaborative tool set. You need to have that kind of thing. So one team went out and solved that technical issue, and now they're stuck with that legacy solution, and it's really difficult to work with. I think, it's just...
Oh, yeah, I get users complaining about it all the time.
All the time. I get, hey, how do I send this file to somebody else? Like, I want to email it to somebody or save it to a disk. And I'm like, I'm not sure. It's a .url in your file explorer, right? Like, if you're
even just copying and pasting a OneNote file is like a giant pain.
Yeah, it really is. And then it's its own like file repository kind of too, right? People can just drop files into it. And it's like, now you can't search for these things. They don't exist to the system. You have to play the game if you really want things to work later on. But yeah, we'll see. I would love to see Loop. I don't want to see it like take OneNote out, but at least not yet. But it would be great to have a modern solution that kind of follows the standards of today as opposed to 10 years ago.
And if any of that happens, you'll learn about it here on the MS Refresh Show.
That is exactly right. All right, cool. So that's all I got. And I think we got some exciting stuff on the Work with AI session this week with looking forward to seeing what Loop's going to look like. And so I think that's about does it. Thanks so much for watching. As always, a like and subscribe is much appreciated. Leave that comment below to get that conversation started. Let us know what you think about some of these things. And Sean, thanks for joining me again this week. I can't wait to hang out with you and everybody else during our next episode.
So where else could they go with it? There are a couple of suggestions by The Verge and by The Information, another publication. But before we get into that, Matt, where do you think Microsoft might be able to apply AI in the M365 side of things? I'm all alone.